I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. On today's episode, we have Brooke Shankland of Eudaimonia Studio. She's an AGF socialite who has a fantastic eye for creative design that is just so eye-catching, and her use of color is amazing. So if you haven't checked her out yet, go check her out. Her link is below in the show description. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy hearing about Brooke's journey from corporate life into quilting life, and let's just get into it. Hey there, have you checked out Patreon yet? When you head over to patreon.com/notyourgranny'squiltshow and you pledge to the show, you get a sticker of the Not Your Granny's Quilt Show logo sent straight to your door. So head on over to patreon.com and help support the show today. Thanks. Hi, Brooke. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. How are you?
Hey Amanda, I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good considering I just came off a crazy weekend, but here we are.
Yeah, it sounds like it was fun, but a lot going on. So glad you
Yeah.
made it back.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was easy drive there, easy drive back. It's just the in between that's like just go
Yeah,
time the whole time.
yeah.
So,
There's so much of Idaho that I want to explore. It's definitely on my list. Even Boise, that's where you are, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard so many good things, and it sounds like it's exploding.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I got to get up there and check it out. So I
Yeah,
think it's only a few hours. I'm in Salt Lake, so
it's about 5
uh,
hours.
oh five. Okay, that's not too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, we drive it. I say we, but like my friends and I just went at the beginning of June to IKEA because we don't have one up here, and it's either Salt Lake or Portland, and Salt Lake is way closer. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say it seemed like a no-brainer, but 5 hours, still a long way to get those, Swedish meatballs.
I know, right? I'm like, we're doing this for a dresser? No,
That I
it's
have to put
fun.
together for 3 hours.
No, I know. I didn't buy any furniture this last time, but my friends did, and they were like, "Oh, now I have to build this thing." I was like, I'm just eating my snacks." Like,
Yeah, just getting in the car and getting it home is, like, just the beginning.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. It's a good time. But how's Salt Lake? Do you like it there? Have you been there? Like, how long have you lived it there?
we moved here about 5 years ago, and I love it here. So I grew up in Dallas and
Okay.
then lived for about 12 years in Chicago,
Oh wow.
and so just spent most of my life in very flat places.
Hmm.
Um, always just been really enamored with the mountains. One of my first jobs was as a management consultant, and my client was out here in Salt Lake. And so I was spending 4 days a week for about 2 years coming out here from Chicago. And I just, every time I look at the mountains, I would just be like, wow. That's
Hmm.
and so sometimes it was cool. I would like bring my husband or my now husband out here for the weekend instead of going back home to Chicago.
Yeah.
Fly him to Salt Lake. We would, go skiing or go visit one of the national parks. And I'd always kind of logged it as one of those places I might want to end up someday,
Yeah.
not thinking that it would actually happen, but yeah, I mean, at some point the stars just aligned and we transferred offices with our through our company and ended up here and just love it. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Are you from Boise or
Yeah.
from the region? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. I
Are
was
you
born and
pretty
raised here.
outdoorsy?
Ish, I'm getting more like my husband, he loves to mountain bike and hike and
Mm,
all that stuff. So I didn't really grow up that way per se, but like we camped a little bit as kids and
mhm.
and all that. Like we're not camping people necessarily, but we do like to go do stuff outside. So
Yeah.
we
I just
hike.
went mountain biking for the first time last week,
Oh
and
wow.
my groin still hurts.
Yeah, honestly, I'm like, I don't I always joke like I want to or not joke, but like I'm like, oh, I want to do more. And my husband's like, yeah, right. Cause I just like I know that feeling and I just it's so hard to bring myself to get on that bike knowing that like my undercarriage is going to hurt for days.
Yeah, yeah. I thought, like, I have a stationary bike here, and I thought,
Mhm.
"I'm prepared for this." Like, I've really broken my body in, I'm
Yeah.
fine. turns out it's way different when you're like going however fast over actual rocks and roots and stuff. And I'm like, damn, it's
Yeah.
freaking hurt.
Yeah. It's crazy. I'm like, these gel pads do nothing. Like, what is happening right now? Yeah. That's like always a joke of ours. He did it. He'll still go mountain biking here and there. We used to do a lot more because our boys were into mountain biking for school, and like
Mhm.
we had like a whole every fall. It's like August through
Oh
October was
my
just
gosh.
nothing but traveling for mountain biking. And
Yeah.
um but yeah, now that it's like every once in a while my husband's like, oh my butt, always forget how much it hurts. I'm like, I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
like one of those things, it's like such a cool thing to do, but also like you have to deal with this excruciating soreness. Ugh.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's
But it's just like I feel like it's a slippery slope when you move to a place like Salt Lake where there's so many outdoor leisure activities at your
mhm,
disposal. And it's like you could go bankrupt just buying all the equipment for stuff like, climbing, skiing,
yeah,
fishing, biking, all
mhm,
the things, camping, and then like
mhm.
there's car camping and then there's backpacking and you need different equipment for that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Anyway, we're always like, let's slow our roll. Let's we just
Try
take on one thing a year.
yeah. Yeah, but Boise has lots of fun outdoorsy stuff too. And I know there's tons of ski resorts around Utah and whatever, but it's nice. Like from Boise, we have Bogus Basin, and it's,
Mhm.
a little 20 to 30-minute jaunt up the hill. And
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, so anyway, uh, I know.
Is this a quilting podcast?
Yeah, I mean it is, right? But we're whole humans. We're not just quilters. So
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. I'm for it.
So you said you were in marketing, or sorry, you were doing management consulting?
Yeah, I was a consultant.
Okay.
Basically, a technology consultant. I did big, they call it ERP implementations. Um, so just big software systems that help organizations manage their financials, their human capital, their um, everything.
Okay.
That was like feels like a lifetime ago. But yeah,
Yeah. It's funny, like when you change careers, you're like, wait, I used to do that. Like, even as a
yeah.
former teacher, I'm like, oh yeah, I used to be a teacher. Like, my niece called me out recently because with all the family being up north with us, like all the cousins, a lot of little kids, and the boys especially were being so rowdy one day. And I was like, telling like how okay, tell me what your cup looks like. And they're like
Mhm,
looking at it. Mine's plain. Okay, you have the plain cup. What does your cup look like? Mine's stripy. Your cup is stripy. Okay, great. Those are your cups for the day. If you finish your drink, rinse it out, set it by the counter. That way you know exactly where it is and you know which cup is
mhm.
yours. And they were like, da da da. And they were like, okay, yeah, totally. And then my niece looks at me and she goes, oh yeah, I forgot you used to be a teacher. And I was like, oh, get out of here. I was like,
Those
I
sort
didn't
of
see you.
comments aren't welcome here.
I'm like, I didn't see you helping. She's like, "'Cause I don't care what they do." I'm like, "Exactly. It's why I'm in charge." Anyway, ugh, I was like, "Wow." I
The
feel
teacher can leave the profession, but
I know, I'm like she was like, "I was wondering where that attitude came from." And I was like, "Well, watch out or you'll get it next." And she was like, "I'm out of here." It was so funny, but yeah, it is funny how easy it is to kind of like when you're ready to switch to just switch over to something different. And like,
yeah,
I mean, it's like a hard mental battle at first, right? Like, at least for me, it was of like letting go of that identity.
yeah. And I think it's tough because obviously, well, I don't know about your parents, but I think most of I mean, I'm a millennial
Mhm.
pretty squarely.
Yeah.
And so my baby boomer parents, and I think most of our boomer parents were all about same company for your entire career, right? It was all about
Mhm.
employer loyalty but I love the stories that I hear about people who are, either constantly reinventing themselves or especially those folks that maybe were in the line of work until like their 40s, 50s, maybe even later, and then said, I want to do something totally different. And then
Mhm.
just completely pivoted to something that, at least from as an outsider, you think, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Um, I love those stories. Like I find them really inspiring because I think I guess I get bored.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, "Okay, what's next?" And I am trying to, like, continue a common or I in my mind, there's a common thread through the things that I've been doing that I'm sure to other people it just seems very erratic, but,
Sure.
um, I don't know, I love it, and I'm like, "Alright, how long can I keep this going?" Or just, until I find something and stick with it until I'm like, "Alright, I feel like I've done everything that there is to be done here, what's next?"
Oh,
Yeah, it was, like, maybe it was shortly after we moved here. I just had this, kind of epiphany. It was kinda funny because I worked in this kind of purpose and fulfillment space
mhm,
within a company, like, helping our employees find a sense of meaning in the work
mm,
that they're doing, and you, like, tell yourself all along, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm fulfilled," and then some stuff happened, and then I suddenly had to just completely reexamine everything, and some of that was kind of identifying these I don't know, just this, um, like all these assumptions or kind of like this paradigm that I was taught or grew up in about like how the world works and how
mhm,
I'm supposed to operate within it and like what a successful career looks like and what is supposed to make me happy and stuff and just completely just shattering it and
yeah,
shedding all that
mhm,
shit. I'm allowed to curse,
yeah.
right?
Oh, please do.
Like
It's not your
just
granny's
shedding
quilt show
all
for a reason.
um just shedding all of that that didn't serve me anymore.
Mhm,
And it's scary because and that stuff is deep and
yeah,
like it still continues to come up and I'm like, nope,
mhm,
you like keep exercising it, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's might be a lifetime of work. I'm realizing because yeah, we're just such products of our environment
mhm,
and I don't know, the things that we're taught are just so deeply ingrained and I don't know,
mhm,
but it's been so freeing.
yeah,
So freeing. Um, and so,
yeah,
yeah, I hope to like I try to kind of have these conversations with people too and kind of like help them identify like, well, what assumptions do you have that you're operating under that maybe don't serve you? You know,
mhm,
like let's bring those up.
yeah, yeah, it's so interesting, and, like, with my husband being in the counseling field now and all the stuff he's learning, like, we've always been hard advocates for, like, growth and mental health and, like, learning about yourself and digging in and, like, "Oh, that makes you uncomfortable? Why? Why does that make you uncomfortable? Like, tell us more about it."
Yeah.
Like,
Lean into it.
yeah, like and, you know, as I was quitting teaching and even, like, the year before that, and then past like, the year past that too, I was doing therapy and, um, just having that available to me and that big transition of a time was like really so great. Like I'm so grateful for it because day one I went in and I was like, I'm tired of my own bullshit. Like I need you to help me see my patterns and I need to fix it because I'm sick of this. And she was like, okay. and but it's crazy because it's like I know I'm doing stuff to get myself into these same situations over and over again, but to be able to, like, really identify it early enough to do something about it before you're, like, crying in the corner every day kinda thing, like,
Yeah.
it takes
Yeah.
a lot of work, and just when I started realizing, like, "Oh, I can't be a teacher right now," like, this is, like, literally pulling on and triggering every insecurity and every vulnerability that I have, and I can't
Mm,
heal while I'm continually re-wounding myself every day,
yeah.
and so that ultimately was why I had to step away. It was just like it was taking a toll on my physical health, not just my mental health and like
Yeah.
anyway. So yeah, it's crazy when you like and we always say like once you see the truth of a situation or of your life or even for other people, you can't not see it. So it's like
Right.
you can't
Yeah.
just go back to pretending like that doesn't exist
Yeah.
now. So,
It's hard when those like internal voices, kind of the culture tells you, don't quit,
yeah.
tough it out, like, you got this, like,
Mhm.
stuff's hard, you gotta just power through, but then on the other hand, you're like, "Well, why? Do I have to?" You know?
Right. It's
And
like why is it so hard? It doesn't have to be.
yeah, and I know, like, I'm not saying everything is easy or should be
Right.
easy,
Right.
but I it's just like and everyone kind of finds their own balance,
Mhm.
but I don't know, it's tough when you have those kind of conflicting, I don't know, voices
Yeah, for sure
talking
that.
inside of you, and yeah,
Yeah.
you're like, "Is this how it has to be?"
Mhm.
And, like, like, at what cost,
Right.
right? And, like, what's my ultimate goal here?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the question I was asking too, like, at what cost am I putting myself through this? Like, yes, I know I got a degree in this. I worked really hard to get myself through that degree, and I even got a master's. It's like,
Mm.
'cause I
Oh,
thought
the
that's what
sunk
I was.
cost is like, the sunk cost fallacy is real.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then it's like, but it's not worth, and my husband was like, it's not worth you. Like, you're
Yeah,
losing you and I'm losing you because you're giving
no,
everything to this thing that is just hurting you. And like,
yeah,
he's like, you're a great teacher and you obviously care, but it's obviously harming you more than it's helping. And
yeah,
so it was just a whole thing. But it was one of those moments where it's like, oh, I got to practice what I preach kind of thing. Like,
mhm,
accepting change and accepting that things aren't going to work out maybe like I thought they would and or had hoped they would, and that's okay, like being okay with that and
yeah,
having.
and not seeing it as a failure too, right? I mean,
Right.
you spent 8 years as a
Hmm.
teacher. I mean, that's a substantial amount of time, and I'm sure you had an amazing impact in that
Yeah,
time that
I hope
you
so.
yeah. I mean, think
I
of how
hope
many
so.
I mean, I don't know how many students you've kind of
Mm,
touched
it's
or came
like
through your class, but I'm
200,
sure that's amazing.
it's like 200 kids, you know
That's a lot.
pretty
Yeah.
good. But yeah, it was fun because my first my first group of third graders just graduated this spring, and so.
Oh,
And I didn't get to see all of them because obviously they all kind of went off in their own ways, but my youngest stepson who just graduated as well, he had um, some of my first students in his class, his graduating class at the school he went to, and so I got to see a couple of them graduate, and they were
mhm.
some of my little loves, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is
Yeah.
crazy. Like, I can't believe this is
And you're like, "Should I go
happening."
back into teaching?" No.
Yeah, I'm like, "No, never." But also like this is like such a cool feeling to see them just like they've blossomed and come into their own and become these like little adults, and they're
Yeah.
so creative and passionate and just like excited to go start their future, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like,
That's
it's really
awesome.
fun. So anyway, um so let's talk about quilting.
Yes, let's. I'm excited.
So what brought you to quilting? How long have you been quilting?
Um, so I haven't been quilting that long, relatively speaking. I think, so if I think about how it really started, I would go back to, I think it's 2016 when my first niece was going to be born.
Oh.
And I was, I think I had at some point saved this, it was a crochet pattern
Hmm.
for this blanket that I had no idea how to crochet. I didn't own any of the crochet hooks or yarn or anything, but I just knew, okay, whenever my sister has a child, which I knew was probably going to happen at some point,
Hmm.
um, that I'm going to make this child this blanket. And so that got me just completely obsessed with crochet. And I imagine this is true for a lot of people. Like there's some crochet for me was this gateway
Hmm.
drug or hobby that,
Yeah.
I was always on Pinterest looking for other crochet patterns. What else can I make? This is so fun. And then it just started to drip quilts into
Mhm.
my feed for whatever reason. And I latched onto that the same way and was like, I don't have a sewing machine. I have no idea how to quilt, but I need to make that design, whatever it was. And so I think my grandmother, who lives in upstate New York, kind of bequeathed me her a sewing machine that she wasn't using.
Mm.
So I was able to get started on that, and the rest is history. I mean, it's funny when I mean, my niece, she got that crochet blanket, which took me for freaking ever,
Yeah,
and still
it's a
has it. But
slow process.
she also got my first quilt, and sometimes I see it in like pictures that my sister will post on the photo stream because now she has another little one who also
Oh,
got her own quilt. I'm like very big on, especially in our family, at least the subsequent children need the same,
Yeah.
that the first one got.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm like, I'm surprised that thing still holds up, because I had no idea what the hell I was doing.
Yeah.
And um, anyway, it's just, yeah, it's been this. I think I really fell in love with it's such a dynamic process with so many different steps.
Mhm.
And so it's always, I think, as I sort of said, I get bored easily. So it's like, okay, when you cut, then you piece, then you
Mhm.
paste it, then you quilt it, and it's like just all these steps. And then when you make something tangible, you look at it and you're like, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's like that funny meme. Um, Sometimes it's like, I clean the house and it's never clean, but like I love when I make a quilt, it stays made,
Yeah.
like no one
Exactly.
undoes it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're like, "No, that's done. I did that and all that effort was worth it because now I have this beautiful thing." Yeah, but
Yeah.
when you clean the house, it's like immediately dirty again and you're like, "Why? Why do I bother?"
Yeah. Like it's just gonna get this is apparently it's like homeostasis. So
Right. Yeah. Like, I guess this is just how it is, but
yeah.
no, I love that because it is like such a fun process to see everything come together. And I too
Yeah.
started with crochet because my grandma taught me. And when I
Mhm.
got to college initially, where I was in Montana and there's like a pretty big unhoused population there. And so we kind of joined this group that was knitting and crocheting scarves and hats and stuff for that community. And
Aw.
so I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I know how to do this. And was doing it so wrong, so wrong. And I was kind of just like fumbling my way through it as I was like relearning, reteaching myself essentially how to do it. And
Yeah.
um, but then once I started, I just didn't stop for a long time. Like, because I mean, yeah, anyway, it was a long time. And but yeah, once my friends convinced me to make quilts, I was like, oh, I like this. This is faster. Like,
Yeah. And I think it's also like with sewing, crochet has some limits in terms of what you can make.
yeah.
And I think with sewing, not that I mean, I'm still very much an amateur in garment sewing,
Ooh,
but it's like
yeah.
anything's possible with a sewing machine and fabric, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
It's
that's my
true.
mindset anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I can sew this. I can make like and it's funny because like I used to be so terrified of sewing machines of like I'm breaking it or not doing it right. And so I've like gained all this confidence from just like being around my mom because she has sewn her whole life and she
Mhm.
can just see something and be like, oh, I can make that. And she'll figure out how to like construct the pieces, whether it's a garment or just another a quilt
That's amazing.
pattern or something that looks like it could be a quilt pattern. She's like, I could make that into a quilt. And she'll just like sketch out and make it. And I'm like, what is happening? Like,
You're like, I'm witnessing genius right now.
yeah, like no joke. I'm just like, okay, this is crazy. But being around that, I think is like so great because if I'm only ever with myself, I'm only experiencing my thoughts and my feelings about something. And so being around somebody who isn't afraid of a machine and isn't afraid to deconstruct something to try to build it back up and figure it out. I'm like, oh, okay, like I can do this. Like just being around that energy has been crucial in me being willing to experience stuff because I'm like, well, obviously if my mom can do it, I can do it. Like I'm
Yeah.
not we're like she's super smart and I'm super smart. So we both can
Yeah.
figure this out kind of thing. And so yeah, it's just been really nice to have that other perspective too. And it's nice, especially for business, like for our business, being able to bounce ideas off each other or
Mhm.
troubleshoot with each other. Cause there's been times where I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. And she's like, I got it. We can figure this out. And she,
I
we
love
both,
that attitude. That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's like so great. Sometimes we both freak out for 5 minutes and then we're like, wait, we can figure this out. We can do this. Like, but yeah, just being able and also having like a fun skill to be able to like gift things to people that you've made is like really,
Yeah.
really good. I
Yeah.
always say we win baby showers, like me and my
It's
friends,
not
because
even fair. It's not even fair.
I know I'm like, just open mine last when everybody's gone. Like, don't, it's,
I mean,
but
I don't mean to brag or anything, but my
I
brother's
know,
great.
I know. It was so
I
funny
made
because
for my friend, her last name is actually, forget what, language it is, but it means hedgehog.
oh,
And so I was like, well, of course I'm gonna make that Carolyn Friedlander hedgehog
mhm.
quilt. And I was like, I hope she loses her mind because I'm like looking at him like this thing is freaking adorable.
Yeah, yeah.
It was so cute. And I made the mistake of showing it to my mom, and my mom was like, well, my friend's son is having a baby and they love hedgehogs. And I was like,
You're
oh
like, "Oh."
no,
You're like, "That's cool, mom."
that's great. I don't know where you're trying to go with this.
Yeah, you're like, "Great story, that's awesome."
Gotta go. Bye.
Yeah, it's so funny just, like, how people just think, like, oh, like, my one friend, her mom is always like, "Can you just make this?" And she's like, "No." She's like, "So this person I know, her friend is having," and she's like, "I that's cool." Like, it's just so funny. Her
Yeah.
mom's like, "Can't you just sew this?" She's like, "No, mom, I don't sew, I quilt." And she's like, "Well, can you
Yeah.
make a quilt out?" She's like, "No."
Well, let me tell you how much it costs first.
Yeah, exactly. Like, thankfully, her mom will, like, buy all the materials and stuff that
Oh
she needs
yeah.
to cover, so it's just funny how and I don't know, um, if you've seen that shirt around that's like, "Yes, I sew, no, I" or like, "Yes, I
Oh, I
quilt,
won't
no,
hem
I
your
won't hem your
pants.
pants." Yeah. I'm like, "Oh, that's so funny." I'm like I always chuckle to my mom, I'm like, "You could never have that because you will hem people's pants." She's like, "I know, it's gross." 'Cause she does garment sewing and she will do like alterations for people and she does
Yeah.
she works with a couple interior designers here in town and so she'll make like pillow covers and like seat cushions and just like all these like curtains and whatever they need and she's just like so good and so fast like she can whip these things out and I'm like I don't what I wouldn't even know the first step of like constructing these things and she's like making these like 8 foot long window seat cushions with zippers and like
Zippers.
yeah, I've I'm gonna show this to you. I literally so I was working part-time at a quilt shop for a few months and just to, get some more experience with different things and
Totally.
whatever.
Yeah.
And they do this thing called Christmas Schoolhouse and it's gonna
Mm,
look completely different this year. So if you're local and go to they'll know it's schoolhouse. But anyway, so there's like lots of make and takes that we did. And one of them was like, what are fun ways we can like work with making pouches or like working with making um oh what is it? It's like this spreadable gel stuff, but it turns cloth into almost like oilcloth. It makes it like waterproof. So you can
oh
buy
wow.
cloth that's that way, like that's
Hmm.
oilcloth, so it's like wipe offable or whatever on one
Yeah.
side. And anyway, but it's called Eau coat. That's what it is. And so you
Gotcha.
just brush on any cotton fabric and it'll make it waterproof. Anyway, so I was like playing around with that, trying to see if we could like melt crayons onto fabric and like seal it to like make
Oh,
fun
that's a cool
designs.
idea.
And so this is one of the
Oh,
things I
that's
came up with.
amazing.
So this is actually on the outside is quilter's vinyl. And so I
Okay. I
just
was gonna say that looks really shiny. You
yeah,
didn't just wipe the stuff on it.
no, and the stuff is pretty shiny. I have a tiny pouch with it in it, but I can't find it. I don't know what I did with it. But anyway, I had
I think I can like picture what like the texture would be.
yeah. So it is, kind of smooth, but it didn't really
Yeah.
like the crayon, like the wax of the crayon. So it was like, don't use crayons, but you can do it on any fabric you want. But this is literally the first zipper I have ever sewn. And you can see
It
it's
looks
like
amazing.
janky on this end. But I was like panicking at my mom's house, like, I don't know how to sew a zipper. She's like, it's so easy. I'm like, is it, Michelle? Is it? She's like, yeah, actually.
Well, then why don't you show me?
I'm like, then you do it. No. And once she showed me, I was like, oh. And then because I
Too
had that
funny.
tutorial, I made little pouches. My niece and the twins, they turned 10 this last spring and they were taking their first airplane ride. We were all going to my brother's wedding
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, I want to make them like a little airplane pack, like fill it with like
Oh,
games,
that's sweet.
just like snacks and just stuff that they can keep their own stuff in. And so I made them each a zippy pouch to
Oh.
like put all their stuff in. And I was like, oh, I feel so cool. Anyway, yeah.
Zippers are a game changer. I think I have installed a couple. Actually, yeah, I have This one here, it's like an exposed. But yeah, I'm always confused what to do on the ends. It's
I
like
know.
there's always just a bunch of thread there.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
hope this stays.
I know. It is awkward, but it's fine. It's like I think it's funny too because I think it is like a gateway, like, you get to, whatever your first craft is, like, obviously for us, it was crocheting, like, then it's like, "Oh, I can sew, like, that's fine, I can sew." You start sewing, and then it's like, "Oh, it's like, "No, I just quilt." But then it's like, "Oh, actually, I wanna make that." So you, like, learn new skills just to be able to make something new for yourself, and then it's like, "But I wanna make
Yeah,
that too," and then you, like, learn a new set of skills, and
totally.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
I'm
always
still
leveling up.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying always leveling up. Yeah,
Yeah.
just, like, finding some whether it's, like, a different piecing technique or, "Okay,
Mhm.
let me try clothes, let me try bags." Like,
Yeah.
like, I love making totes, and then sometimes I even just play with how am I attaching the handles? Am I just sewing them straight in? Am I using rivets?
Mm.
I used for the first time, I actually, like, put jean thread in my machine. Not a
Oh,
good idea,
okay.
actually. I'm not sure my machine was really, designed to handle what I was trying to do with it, but, like, do the kind of top stitching, with the square and the X,
Yeah,
like, at the base of the handle, and it
yeah.
turned out fine, but I was like, definitely doesn't look profesh."
You're like, "I could do better."
Yeah, but it's handmade, it's
Right? I know, my mom made a bag out of seatbelt straps, like,
oh,
you can,
that's
like,
cool.
buy that you can buy rolls of, like, seatbelt material,
Yeah,
and she got the pattern, I don't even know who it's by, so I'm so sorry, but I just don't know, and, she was like, "Oh, I've got some cute fabric to line it with, whatever." She just, like, whipped up this seatbelt bag, and I was like, "What?" It's
uh,
so cute, and she carries it everywhere because it's, like, so sturdy and durable, and it's a nice size to, carry everything,
and she's an ambassador for safety.
and yeah, she's like, "Get your seatbelts on, people, like, come on."
Click it or take it.
Yeah, exactly. She's like a walking advertisement. Yeah, it's just fun, and, like, I think too, again, like, being around someone who isn't afraid to sew anything, it's, like, makes it easier to try things because then I know I have a resource for help, like, right next to
Yeah,
me. So if I'm like, "I wanna do this," she's like, "Okay," and I'm like, "Okay, how do I start?" You know? She's, like, super willing to help me, which is so nice, but it's just been funny, like, exploring all that and realizing, like, oh, and I, like, earlier this year promised Lonnie that I would make her BFF bag, which is, like, she designed this really cute, it's Best Fucking Fanny is what it stands for. Um, it's like a little fanny pack, but you can, like, wear it over your shoulder too, but it's got, like, a pocket for your phone, it's got all these, like, cute zippers and, like, pockets on the inside, and
mm,
I'm like, "Yeah, I can make that," and I'm like, "What am I thinking?" I want to so bad still, and I have some, like, fabric that I got in mind to make it, but and she convinced me to make a pair of pants, which I have the pattern, I have the
just
fabric.
really loving on your future self, like,
I know. I'm like, future me is gonna be so proud of past me, but right now I feel scared and I don't have enough time, which is fine. Anyway, it's like, yeah, that gateway into, like, just all different kinds of, like, well, if I can sew straight line, I can sew this, or, like, if I can make that quilt, I can make all these things. That, like, gives you this confidence to, like,
yeah, like, "Oh, well, I just need this other foot," or "I just need this other tool."
yeah, exactly. It's kind of fun. I think it's just, like, because I was willing to, like, be open to trying that skill because I said no for so long to sewing or quilting, and
Yeah,
when I finally was like, "Okay, fine," and loved it so much, I was like, "Okay, I can quit being such a stingy bitch." Like, I was just like,
yeah.
"Why was I saying
Well, like,
no?"
yeah, this trend of kind of bringing quilting into also these other, items that you can make, like it's quilted everything.
Mhm.
I'm all for it. Like the quilted coat craze, I think I was late on that train, not because I was against it, I just was, like, too intimidated by it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm all for it. Quilted bags, quilted I think I've seen, like, quilted scarves, which I was like, "Oh, I hadn't really thought of that, but that makes sense."
Ooh. Yeah.
All in
Oh,
on the quilted totes, like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun. I actually was at Cracker Barrel and saw they had this dress, like, It looked like a patchwork quilt out of, like, men's shirts, but it
Mm,
was, like, red, white, and blue, and it was clearly for, like, a 4th of July situation, but I was like, "I can
yeah,
make that." I was like, "I want this dress, but I'm gonna if I ever get anything like this, I'm gonna make it." Like, but it
yeah.
was just, like, little, 2-inch squares, and I was like, "I could make that."
I know. It's actually it's good, it gives you some restraint when you're shopping because 'cause you're like, "Well, I don't wanna buy that because I could make it." Not that
Mhm.
I'm going to, but I
I could.
could.
Exactly. Yeah.
So why would I buy it?
Like, why would I spend
I'm
$50 when
gonna
I can
spend
make it
3
for
times as much on
200?
the
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's sometimes a hurdle for me to get over is like, "Oh, I spent all this money on fabric to make this thing," but then it's like, it's something it's gonna be around for a long time, hopefully, especially with a quilt. It's like,
and it gives you joy, and it's
yeah.
if you gift it, it's giving them so much joy, and,
Mhm.
yeah, hopefully it'll become an heirloom, and
Yeah. At some point, hopefully, but
that's the hope. Yeah,
yeah.
we give them away and we hope for the best, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's funny, like, um 'cause I always tell if I gift a quilt to, for babies or whatever, I'm like, "Please use this quilt. I don't care if they puke or poop on it, like, that's what it's
Mhm.
for, it's cotton, it's washable, like, just love it
Yeah,
and use it." Like, those stains and those like, that's memories of that you know, of life, of growing
right.
up, and, like,
Yeah,
I'd rather see that. I'd rather see that quilt be so well used that it's, like, starting
yep,
to come apart than see it tucked away and, like,
and never see the light of day.
yeah, like, I want them I want it used, I want it abused, like,
Yeah,
yeah, like,
well
take it to the
loved.
max, yeah, so, it was funny because I think I even made a post about it in my Instagram, like, in the fall or something, but, I had made my friend a just, like, a patchwork quilt out of different Ruby Star fabrics for her baby,
Mhm.
um, they used it for tummy time all the time, and because she loved
Aw.
the octopus fabric, the print, um
Oh, yeah.
Ruby
That's
Star,
precious.
and I used the fuchsia one, and she just would love to stare at the octopus and, like, she would, like, kinda pick
What is
at the
that
little
mystical creature?
yeah, and I was like, "Oh, that makes me so happy." So, I was like, "Thank you for using her quilt, like, it makes me so happy," and I, like, made it pretty big so that she could grow into it and keep use
Yeah,
it for a long time through her childhood, and not huge, but, enough that she can use it as an 8-year-old and still snuggle in
totally.
it, and
Yeah,
Um, so anyway, I was just like, I love seeing that because I'm like, "Oh, thank you. That makes me so happy." Like, that's what I want.
yeah, yeah. Get your jewel on it, pee on it, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So
I
it's just and then I was like guilty of doing that. My mom had made me a quilt for graduating with my master's and she put white minky on the back and like the background fabric is white. And I was like, why did you do that? Now I can't use it. I'm so scared of getting it dirty. And as I'm, like, preaching to people, like, use the quilt," I still had this
yeah,
quilt stashed, and I was like, okay, I'll" and so now it lives in the living room, but
yeah. I will say when I'm especially for a baby quilt, but all quilts, I mean, I hate putting a light colored backing on it because 'cause I'm like,
yeah.
just to be I hope that people will take it out to, like, picnics or whatever,
Mhm.
and, like, they'll probably get grass stains on the bottom or just, like, get walked on or,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
probably true of the top too. So when I like to use white as well. So maybe I'm being hypocritical. But anyway, yeah.
No, I think backings get a lot more in my opinion, I think they get beat up a lot more because they're like,
Yeah.
that's the side that's, like, on your body or, it's, like,
Or on the ground. Yeah.
on the grass or the ground, and so, I don't know, Minky thankfully doesn't really hold stains, and so it cleans really
No,
easily, and
it's
that's
just
why I
so
love to put it on the
luxurious.
It's I know. We put it on, like, so many quilts. I think I maybe have 2 or 3 that don't have it, but every single other one of my quilts has it because I love it.
Yeah.
Like, we sell it
Uh,
because we just wanna have it all the time.
yeah.
So we're like, "Oh, we'll just sell it, then we can get our hands on whatever colors we want, whenever we want," and so
Good thinking.
benef
Yeah.
benefit to, our customers too. They can buy
Hmm.
Minky, and it's great. But so how quickly, I guess, like, from when you started quilting, did it take you to start making your own patterns?
It might have been um a couple years. I mean, I do think from the beginning I was like, I love kind of problem solving and doing the math and
Mhm.
like the geometry of it. So I think even from the beginning, I was always trying to oh, I want to create that design. Let me figure out like the shapes and what sizes they were. I want to size that down or size it up. Um, but I think it was so in 2016. So then a couple years later, we moved here and we moved from like a small one bedroom apartment in Chicago to a house here. And so
Mm.
there was just a lot more space to kind of fill. And I remember thinking, like, I was buying stuff to just fill, like, to cover the wall, to put on the shelf. And
Right.
at some point, I was like, these things don't mean anything to me. Why am I buying all this crap from Hobby Lobby? Like, I love
Right.
Hobby Lobby, but like,
You're right.
I just wasn't, I was like, why am I buying these random jars or like candlesticks or something?
Yeah.
Um, like I would rather have something that kind of like reflects me and my husband, I don't know, things that are interesting to us. And so I think that kind of put some interest in me to create my own designs. And um I don't know how much people like kind of know about my background, but I like studied philosophy in college. It was one of my majors.
Mm.
And have always just like thought really that deeply about these big questions of life and
Yeah.
why are we here? Like, what does it
Mhm.
mean to live well and like, I don't know,
Yeah.
be happy and make a difference and connect with people. And so I just kind of sought to create these designs that represented and would serve as a reminder to us, so long as we're in our home, like, oh, like forgot about that concept. Like that's good to keep in mind. Um, and so that was that definitely fed into my my start in designing.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, once I started going down that rabbit hole, yeah, I was lost
Yeah.
forever.
You're like, "I'm still in here today."
I'm still here. I'm just deeper and yeah, there's no more light anymore. Um, it's gone. I'm just here for good. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so fun. I never I sometimes kind of in shock that that I do this or that like people are interested in many of my designs because I don't have I mean, I was always sort of creative growing up, but not anything I would say was like out of the ordinary per
Mm.
se. And I certainly don't have any kind of artistic or creative training,
Mhm.
uh, not formally. And so, you know, um, I'm like, yeah, this is just, a girl playing around with shapes and then figuring out how to sew them together.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's pretty dang cool. And I love it. And I'm sure this is true. Well, I know it's like, I call it the quilter's dilemma, just too many projects, too
Mhm.
little time. And I'm sure
Yeah.
this is true of designers too. There's just like too many ideas rolling around. They're on the back burner and there's just not enough time to create them all. And so,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's just like, all right, which ones are most significant? But also balancing like which ones do I think people are gonna like? Like that's
Mhm.
kind of an interesting um I don't know, just like concept to balance. Is like how do you stay true to your muse
Mhm.
and like what speaks to you and inspires you, but like also what's gonna allow you to stay in business, you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah. It's like you wanna create for yourself and what feels good to you, but then you also wanna make sure that people are gonna like it, because if they don't like it and it doesn't sell, then, like, okay, well, that's business, but
Yeah.
that's
I'm
a
listening
tricky
to this,
spot.
I don't know who Rick Rubin is.
Mhm. Yeah.
Have you listened or read his book?
I haven't read his book, but I did hear him, I'm obsessed with the Armchair Expert podcast, with
Oh,
Dax
okay.
Shepard and Monica Padman, and they interviewed him. Um, his episode was earlier this year, but yeah, I listened to that and I was like, I had known who he was, but listening to him speak to them, I was just like, holy crap, this guy is crazy good. Like, it was just
Yeah.
interesting. So anyway,
Yeah. No, so I mean, he also I think was doing the rounds to promote his book on all the podcasts that I listen to, and I was like, I gotta listen. This book sounds amazing, and I think it's all about how to just really honor the creativity inside of you. And
yeah,
his philosophy is whoever your end user is of what you're creating, they come last.
yeah,
It's the integrity. to like your sense of creativity, what inspires you, that's going to then make it attractive to, the people that would use, um,
Mhm.
or appreciate what you're creating.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting perspective
Mhm.
that I'm, and I'm always, he's obviously in the music industry, but I, for like the last couple years, have been trying to draw more and more parallels between like songwriting and
Mhm.
quilting.
Yeah.
Maybe create like, coming up with connections that don't really exist. But I'm just like, oh, collaborations. And it's like, oh, do you come up with like this aspect first or this aspect first? And like
Mhm.
the process for, um, even the ideation phase
Yeah.
and things like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
also amusing. Sorry, I have a penchant for tangents if you didn't
No, me too. So I'm here for it. I love hearing all the things. So no, I think that's like so cool though, because I think it doesn't have to stand like the creative process for different disciplines, they don't have to stand alone. So if you're drawing parallels to songwriting, then do it. Like they're there. If you can see it, then they exist. It doesn't mean it's like just because maybe you haven't heard it in the mainstream or, somebody else hasn't like brought it to the forefront of the zeitgeist. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think that's what I love about humans is that there's infinite possibilities out there for connections and just seeing and doing things differently. And even it's like you might feel like you're doing something the same as someone else, but every little minute change that you make, or you might even set something in a different spot one day than you did the day before, and that sets your whole trajectory in a different lane. Like you just don't know what's going to come of all of it. And so I think, like you're saying, there's like so many projects, like too many projects, too little time. And same with ideas. Like there's so many ideas out there. And I think some people are worried, like, oh, the market is saturated with pattern designers. I'm like, no, it's not. Unless there was no more ideas for quilting patterns because they've all been done, it's not saturated. There are so many more ways that we can pull, nature and shape and color and all this stuff into quilting. And the fact that there's more people out there feeling inspired to do it just means that there's that many more ideas out there happening. Like
Totally.
there's space for all of it. And you know I think the more we kind of let go of those boomer ideas of like you stay in the one lane your whole life and you retire and then you go have fun. It's like, no, I think for millennials, we've really been like, you know what? Fuck that. We're going to do what we want. We're going to do it how we want and the way we want, with who we want. And you can't say anything to me.
Yeah.
and, and so I think that concept in and of itself has led to this idea that like the more small businesses and the more people that are encouraged to create their own business and to run it the way that they want to run it, it just like helps us fight this like machine that seems like it's against humans' best interest.
Yeah.
And in this way, it puts it into our hands and lets us make what we want to make and lets us build what we want to build. I'm sure there's some rules around it because government, like, but we still have a lot of freedom within that. And I think it's so cool to me to see like more women coming forward and being like, no, I have something to say. Like, I have ideas. Like, it's like,
Mhm.
I mean, when I tell you I've seen Barbie 3 times already, like I cry every time, I
Oh, I
laugh
still
every
have
time.
to see it.
Oh my God, it's so good. And I know it's not for everybody, but I just think there is that message in there that like you can blame outside sources for your problems, but until you dig in deep and try to understand yourself and like try to understand how to move past those things, like you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do, even if patriarchy and horses get in your way.
Yeah.
Like,
Is
uh,
that a saying?
oh, you'll see in the movie, it is a thing.
Oh, okay.
And you'll be like, oh, Amanda said that. That's funny. I'm not funny. I steal it from other people.
Hey,
Anyway,
everything is borrowed. All inspiration is borrowed from somewhere, right?
exactly. It's like, what is inspiration but getting something from somebody else?
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, I just love that concept that like if the corporate world or like fitting into a box of a career doesn't work for you, that you can create your own stuff. Like you can create your own business and it doesn't have to be handmade. It just that
Mm,
is one avenue of this, idea that you can make your own path that a lot of people seem to be taking on and hopefully it comes around more to like I think pricing has been an issue, especially because handmade shops are mostly women run and we have a really hard time asking for what we're worth and
yeah,
expecting our value from other people. And
yeah,
um, so I don't know if you've struggled with that, but it definitely has been tricky trying to like find a happy medium of like not overpricing stuff just because we're like we know this is worth so much money, but also being like realistic and like okay, what can be affordable for some people. We know it's not for all people, but I think niching in and knowing your audience, like you were saying, of like who cares about the end product, like what do you want to offer, what do you see coming out of your process, and like focusing on that because I think your signature is what people want. It's not people think they
yeah,
want things until they don't realize what they don't know. It's like
yeah,
this whole thing. But
yeah.
anyway.
And the more you niche yourself, the more valuable you are going to be to those people who are attracted to what you're putting out there. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, pricing is tough because, yeah, you do want to be inclusive and make it accessible to people. And it's easy to just, I'm definitely guilty of this kind of anchoring to, okay, well, what are other people asking for their patterns?
Yes.
And then also it's like, well, because there's cost-based pricing, like, okay, well, what do I need to like recoup my costs and then get the margin that I want
Mhm.
versus value-based pricing? Like, well, what is somebody willing to pay for this? Which obviously varies, but it's like,
Right.
okay, depending among your audience, you know, what's that kind of sweet spot? Um, it's not going to price everyone out, but also, and I think in kind of other realms, I've learned about how, I mean, not that, well, we do as designers sometimes give away patterns for free, but even if you charge, like what you charge is also, that feeds into like what someone perceives is the value of what
Mm.
you're offering too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they assume that you price it at its real value.
Mhm.
So if it's like $2, I'm like, well, this must be a $2 pattern, right? It must not,
Yeah.
whatever that means to somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's like this whole kind of mind fuck, to be honest. Like,
Yeah, it really is. It's hard because it's like, and sometimes we'll whip up quilts just because we have scraps and we're like, oh, we can make a really cute baby quilt out of this leftovers. We don't want to just like hold on to the scraps for nothing. And so,
mhm,
and then I'm like, oh, and on the Sweet Pea Instagram, I've been every Tuesday, hopefully remembering to like post a quilt on our stories that we're willing to sell and we're discounting them. Like I try to make sure to let people know like they're discounted because we would like to sell them and we would like them to go to new homes that so they're not like just sitting around in our studio. And
mhm,
it's good high quality quilting fabric. It's not just like random,
yeah,
it's not junk quilts. It's like come from good high quality fabric and all that, but it's
mhm,
just like okay, how do we price this so that it'll sell but also so that we don't feel like we're just like giving it away in a sense of like we put time into it, so it's not just like free fabric. It's not just like no, I took the time to make this little design and put it together and quilt it and bind it and like so it's just been tricky, but
yeah.
it's fun and I'm really hoping somebody wants to buy something soon because they're just hanging out. I'm like, come buy one, please. But anyway,
Promo.
yeah. So you just recently had a pattern come out. Is
I
that
did,
right?
yeah. It's called Wayfinder.
Yeah. I was seeing your post about it. I was like, holy crap, this thing is gorgeous. It's like so out of my wheelhouse. I think it would be intimidating to me, but it's gorgeous and like,
It's definitely beginner friendly, I promise.
Yeah. And as I look more at it, I'm like, oh, okay. I can kind of see like the thinking in it. And I'm like, okay, that's probably not as hard as my brain was like.
Yeah, it like altogether it looks complex, but it's actually one block, 9, or at least for the throw size, 9
Yeah.
times, and sometimes they're depending on which I have this problem with wanting to include too many different variations and options
Mm.
in my patterns,
Yeah.
because 'cause I'm always, like, twisting things and I'm like, "Oh, but they could do this, or they could do this," and then I'm like, "Do I have samples of all these different variations?"
Right.
Um, but there's one version where you just rotate. I haven't created this one. I
Mm.
call it the Starburst version, but you just rotate the block. The standard one that you've seen that looks kind of like mid-mod
Uh-huh.
style is just it's the same block reflected,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
with one another, and so, yeah, that one is, I really love this one for well, I love the look, like, it's different,
Mm-hmm.
but also, like, the significance behind it. Because all my designs have like I mentioned, my obsession with, like, philosophy and mindfulness and imbuing my designs with some of these concepts.
Yeah.
This one in particular, kind of came from this idea that, like, we always think, "Oh, when I reach that place or when I achieve that, I'll be happy,"
Right.
and you think there's this place, this destination that you're gonna arrive at, and, like, that's happiness and, your life is complete or whatever. And I had this realization. It first came to me, I was reading Siddhartha,
Mm.
which now I've vowed to read it every year because I'm like, well, it's short and it just has so many good nuggets in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one of the characters says, it's quoted in the pattern. I hope I don't butcher it, but it's like, it's the same with me as it is with you, my friend. I'm not going anywhere. I'm always on the way.
Mm.
And like this, I was like, yes, we're always on our way. Like,
Yeah.
we're never gonna get there.
Right.
This is it.
Yeah.
And so the kind of that, like, fun design of, like, the dots, which it's funny, I've gotten comments like, "Oh, it looks like Pac-Man." I've
Oh,
gotten, "It looks mid-mod, it looks, Art Deco, it looks like the Jetsons."
yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, "I love that, whatever it is to you, great."
Yeah.
The Pac-Man one got me, I thought that was funny.
That is funny. I can see that, but also like that's silly.
I was like, "Oh, I should work a little dude in there,
Yeah.
working away at the dots with the little ghost. Should just applique that on there."
That would be so funny.
Um, but yeah, like this, and it's something I try to keep in mind because I think we just get so sucked in to, and like kind of create this misery for ourselves. Like,
Mhm.
and again, I'm not saying like there aren't hard times that we have to push through. But I don't know, just like taking a moment and saying, no, like, the present is, like, to
Yeah.
sound trite, like, the present is all we have.
Yep.
Like, let's enjoy this, and there are things that we can, hopefully appreciate and find joy in along the way. So,
Mhm.
this is, like, just I don't know, something I really the significance between all my designs is something that I myself, like, have to continue to learn and relearn.
Yeah.
Like, this one, for whatever reason, is, like, just a tough one that I have to keep learning, and it's just but, like, when I do have those moments of kind of, "Oh, yeah," where I do kind of recognize, "Oh, yeah, that is the
Mhm.
truth," or the reality. It's like, I don't know, yeah, I just kinda exhale.
Mhm. You're
Mm,
like, "Oh, I didn't
so
realize I was holding on to that so much." Like, I
yeah.
think yeah, I've experienced that too, where it's like I recognize a pattern in myself and it's like, "Oh my gosh, I was in this weird situation for so long." And then, you know, it took me a while to recognize that it had happened again. And then but the
Mm.
next time it happened again, it was like a shorter period of time that I recognized it. So it's like I can
Progress.
yeah, right? Like I can beat myself up about the fact that I got into those patterns, but I also can step back and go, "Oh, you know what? I was able to recognize it so much sooner and
Mhm.
do something about it than stay stuck like I used to." And so just finding that gratitude for that and being able to like know that, yeah, okay, I'm still on my way. I'm still making my way through
Mhm.
this. And I think too, that realization, like when it washes over you, it's like crazy how our bodies react sometimes. Cause like there's sometimes where it's like I take that exhale and I'm like, oh, okay, thank goodness. Like now I can do
Yeah.
XYZ to deal with this situation. And sometimes like it's like a fountain of tears. You can't turn it off. It just comes out. It's like your body has to release it however way. It's like
Yeah.
it's just so funny the different the different ways that it gets released. And it's like, oh man, I must have been holding on to that one like deeper than
Yeah.
this other one. It's like
Yeah.
kind of
You're
like
like, "Ooh, that one was down there."
yeah, like I can feel that one in my toes. Like, what is happening? But yeah, but I love that you're like bringing those concepts and like putting them into your quilts because I think like people are going to make what they want from it, but at least to you, every time you see it out there in the wild, it's like you get to see that little
Yeah,
spark of that out there in other
totally.
people's
Yeah,
hands.
it's just like these little reminders for me, and sometimes I don't know how many people just kind of think my designs look cool versus actually, it is really it's really lovely when anyone says, or compliments me on my design, like, "Oh, your design is so modern, they're so different, that's awesome."
Yeah.
Um, what is like what puts me completely over the moon is when people are like, "I really needed to hear that."
Mm,
And like, they were probably going through something in their life that they just needed to hear that message at that particular time. And I'm like, "Man, this is exactly why I do this. Like, that's
exactly.
awesome." And like, that's what I hope to achieve with each design is like, yeah, if you just like it for what it looks like, awesome. I create them because I think they look cool too.
Yeah.
I hope that also, like, as an additional benefit, people get a new perspective.
Hmm.
And not that any of these things that I'm like putting out there are, like just ironclad truth, like you have to live by this. But
Right.
I hope it like just provides a new angle for people
Yeah.
to, just be like, huh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe that'll help me when I'm in this like situation if I think about that way of putting it or thinking about it.
Yeah. It's
So,
just something to consider. And you never know. Like you said, sometimes it's just like, oh, that's so cool. And sometimes it's like, no, this, I needed this. Like, and you just never
mm,
know when that's going to be. But I think, at least for me, in instances where like we've been able to provide something for someone, it's like, especially when we're making memory quilts, like people sending their
yeah,
loved ones clothing to us and we're creating something for them to hang on to. Like,
mhm,
we don't always get we don't always get responses back. Like once we send those quilts out, we just never know. Like, are we gonna get feedback because
yeah,
it's like crazy how few people reach back out and say, oh my gosh, I got it. Thank you so much. I love it. It's like sometimes it's
yeah,
just crickets. We hear nothing. And I'm like, oh my God, we worked so hard on that. It's better than a bad review, but it's like I'd also just like to know that they got it kind of thing. But anyway,
yeah.
so
And
when they do,
yeah, you start to like make assumptions, like,
yeah,
or question, did they like it? When in reality, because sometimes I think this, if I get something and I didn't, maybe I failed to reach back out to someone to let them know, I'm like, they
yeah,
probably think I'm not happy with this, but like I'm enthralled. So this is
yeah.
amazing.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, I just have to, instead of going down the dark path, I'm like, okay, maybe they just love it so much. They're just so happy with it. They just are like done,
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just assuming that instead of the
That
worst. And
that's the
so then when
baseline.
people do reach back out and they're like, I'm sobbing, like, I can't express to you how much this
Um,
means to me. Like, you just completely changed my outlook. It's like, whatever it is, it's just like, okay, this is why we're doing this because yes, sometimes people just want a pretty quilt because it looks good in their home or whatever, and they don't sew and they just want it made, and that's fine. Like that's why we're here. That's what we're
yeah,
doing this for. But in those moments when it is more meaningful for the person and it does bring them a sense of closure or just some peace of mind or whatever it is, it's like, okay, yes, like this is the why. Like this is why we're doing this to help give people something that they can't give themselves. And so
yeah,
anyway.
yeah. And you have to like return to that too when you get into especially when I get into just like all the administrative, you know, just
Mhm.
minutia or whatever. And you're like, oh, why am I doing this? Like,
Right.
am I just, I don't know. Is this important? And then, yeah, I think back to something someone said, or I just kind of realized that why behind everything. And you're like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's why. All right, keep at it.
Yeah, it just kinda it, like, renews your at least for me, like, it just renews my, like, desire to keep going, and not that I'm,
Mhm,
like, thinking of quitting or stopping or anything, but I think there's some times where I'm just like, maybe we've had a run-in with a few customers who weren't so pleasant and, or
mhm,
whatever, and it's like
yeah,
everybody's on their own path. They have their own perspectives of the interaction, and so it just is what it is, but that can be really hard, and so then when you get the ones that are shiny, it's like, "Oh, thank you."
yeah. Oh, yeah, because I feel like you need 20 shining ones for every one even remotely bad one. 'Cause
Yeah.
I know it's even our psychology to,
Mhm.
hone in on the negative and stuff, for kind of threat purposes, I think, like
Yeah.
evolutionarily, but it's I see that in myself because yeah, every so often I have, and maybe it's not even that negative an exchange, but sometimes people's tone through email
Right?
comes off as very unpleasant. And I think also people don't always appreciate that, or I don't know what assumptions they make about like who's on the other side of the computer, or that like
Mhm.
maybe we have teams of people who, are
Right.
able to respond. And so like they want stuff immediately. And I'm like, it's just me, right? Like just me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that can be like, there's such a wide range of the way businesses are run in the quilting community that, yeah, it's like you do run into like a one man show versus, a team of people putting stuff together for someone, and you just never know what that looks like. And so just making that assumption and being like, well, why don't you have this to me faster? I'm like, because I'm just a girl making you a quilt. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like stuff happens. Like, it's just, it,
Cue Gwen Stefani.
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. And obviously it's not everybody, but it's just kind of funny to me just like how like experiencing the different ways people interact. And I'm like, what happened to you? Like, why are you like this?
Yeah, like tell me your back. Like, do you need a hug? That's
Right.
not something my husband says all the time. Like, you need a hug.
Oh, yeah. It's like I always need a hug, but I think that person needs one more. Like, I'm
Yeah,
just,
but it's like you gotta say, "Okay, I'm gonna stop this cycle right here,"
mhm,
right? Because there's this something happened to this person that caused them to
right,
act this way, whether that be a habitual thing or, maybe in the moment, but
right,
yeah.
right. And it's like, I'm like so grateful that I have the ability to think that way now because for all the years I worked in retail, putting myself through college, whatever, like
Mhm.
encountered some of the nastiest
Oh my
people,
gosh.
and I used to get so upset by it. And now it's like I have the ability to take a breath, take a step back and go, okay, this isn't about me. Like there's clearly
Mhm.
something else behind all of this that is, you know, feeding into their mind as we're communicating. They're thinking a certain way, but that's not how, it's like, okay.
Mhm.
And then I go back and look at like my messaging. Am I staying like true to myself and like
Yeah.
being clear and concise, but also having a boundary of like, no, I'm not going to like refund you 100% of your money because you've decided all of a sudden that, it's like there's that, not that that's the case or anything, but
Yeah.
just throwing it out there of like, there's like I have to have certain boundaries for me knowing the work that I put into something,
Sure.
and we keep the lines of communication really open on purpose just because it can get kind of hairy when, especially when you're dealing with making custom quilts for people. Like
Yeah.
you have to know exactly what they want, and you have to know they have to know what our capabilities are, and if they won't know unless we tell them. And so it's just that kind of back and forth of being willing to communicate and not just make assumptions on our end, especially because it's like, well, I would assume that they would want this. Well, the times that I've defaulted to that are the times where I've had unhappy, not always, but
Mhm.
had some unhappy clients. And it's like, oh, that's my fault because I didn't ask and I just assumed. And
Yeah.
if, then it's like, okay, I do have to rectify that. But anyway,
Yeah. No, it's tough. Yeah, because I imagine I sometimes, like, I don't wanna reach out to people because I feel like I'm bothering them, so I'm like,
Mhm.
"Well, if I were them, what would I want?" And then it's like, "Oh, that was not correct."
Right. Yeah. I think it's like a societal thing for women to be meek and sit back and assume that we're bothering
Oh,
people by
totally.
speaking up. And I think to run a business, you have to be willing to step up and say, no, I have a question, or like, I need to talk to this person. Like, I'm not bothering anybody. Like, this is business.
Yes. Yeah, that I'm
And
doing my job, and I think, yeah, maybe some of it for me, like, it maybe is rooted in fearing that I will look like I don't know, like I don't have the
yes,
competence that I wish that I could, like, project,
yes,
and, I mean, that's all like, I've had confidence issues, since the day I was born.
yeah,
Like, I some of the very kind of quintessential female, I don't know, qualities, I feel like I embody and, like, not in the best way, actively working on them.
yeah,
Certainly like the people pleasing,
hmm
the confidence, the meekness, like
hmm
undervaluing yourself, all of that. Um, yeah, it's tough. Tough world out there.
yeah, it really is. But I think I always say this to my husband because, like I was telling you, we've had like so many career changes in school and this and that and the boys, and like, there just has been a lot of things going on in our lives. But whenever things seem to like, if we feel like we're fighting uphill and things are really hard, we'll just stop and go, okay, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing wrong? Because when we're staying true to ourselves, when we're doing things in the most loving way possible and being honest and kind, things seem to just like work. It's work, like we still have to work at it,
Yeah.
right? It's not just like you were saying, it's not just easy. It's
Hmm.
simple, but it's not easy.
Sure. Yeah.
um, Things seem to smooth out. But when we're fighting it, when we're fighting our path, I'm like, okay, something's not right. This feels too hard. Like there's unnecessarily emotional stuff happening. There's unnecessary just like problems that keep popping up.
Hmm.
But then every time when we take a step back and we kind of renew our focus and shift things a little bit, then it's like, oh, then they start moving forward again. And it's like, so I feel like especially with our maker businesses, like the more we stay true to ourselves and be honest and kind and loving and keep that in your thoughts when you're communicating with people and in whatever you do to operate your business, like I feel like things go smoothly, and that's just my experience, so I can only speak for myself. But it does seem that way when I'm like in my head, like letting my own trauma, my own baggage like speak for me, then that's when problems crop up. But when take a step back and I think, no, I know how to deal with this. Like, okay, if I'm more, just need to be more loving to this person and like
Yeah.
let them feel heard and understood. And then it's like smooths itself out, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
nobody wants to fight, really. It's just
No.
a lot of
And I
times a
just,
coping mechanism. So it's like,
yeah.
how do I show this person I'm not a threat without being a doormat? Like,
Yeah. It's, it's tough. Yeah.
mhm,
And I sometimes I wish, well, I know it sounds like you and I have no doubt you've encountered some unpleasant people in retail, like in
mhm.
person, right? Who are
Yes.
working, yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes even I just like so much of this I think would be eliminated if we just kind of communicated as if we were talking in person.
Right.
And like sometimes emails or like Instagram comments or messages, sometimes I'm like, would you say that to my face?
Right. Yeah.
You
Like,
know?
would you be talking to me this way if you were standing in front of me at a store and I was
Yeah.
trying to help you? Like, is that what you would say to me? And it's like, probably not. So, and I think that's a good tool because I think sometimes I'll start to get like super formal or like the way I'll say things, I'm like, I would never talk like that. So I'll like delete it and then say it in the way that I would say it. And I feel like
Yeah.
that makes things more personal too. And I think it helps bring like people's guard down because they're not like facing this like robotics facade of business
Yeah.
person, like, or business owner. They're talking to a person. And so
Yeah.
I know
And to
some
be
people are
clear,
like,
I mean, I've never gotten anything super nasty,
no,
but
me
sometimes
either.
just the way people phrase it, I'm
Like,
like,
excuse
and
you.
maybe like I have to give them the benefit of the doubt, like maybe they're, I think a lot of people are just like on their phones, shooting off emails,
Hmm.
or on their way to something in between meetings or whatever. But
Yeah.
um, I
Yeah.
mean, whatever. This just speaks to like the broader culture, I think, around and
Yeah. 100%.
my dislike for texting, especially. I mean, people don't text me for business stuff, but yeah,
Yeah.
tech, technological communication is not my strong suit, or the
Yeah.
written ones, especially over the phone. I try to set up, well, through business stuff, I try to be really responsive, but
Hmm.
I think my friends all know, like, just call Brooke. She sucks at text. It might sit there in her
Yeah.
messages for a couple days. So if it's something that needs, you know, relatively immediate attention,
Just call her.
just call her. Um,
That's
so
so
yeah,
funny.
I don't know. Being a business owner, it's fun. It's like so many things like you obviously you can't anticipate.
Yeah.
And some of it's like that's fun.
Yeah.
Um, it's just
Yeah.
also so multifaceted, like
Hmm.
you think, oh, I think so many entrepreneurs, they think, okay, I'm really good at this, or I'm really passionate about this. I'm gonna start a business around that. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then you don't realize you've got that's just like now a fraction of what like how you're gonna spend your time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Like, yeah, how much, like, if you broke down the time, it's like you spend actually very little time in the creative space comparatively. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, and then you have to do this and you have to do this, like all the logisticals and administrative kind of tasks of sitting in front of the computer. And you're like, oh, I just want to be sewing right now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't want to be playing around in Adobe Illustrator, creating
right.
mock-ups. And it's like, no, I need to like create this plan, or I need, to
Hmm.
manage these things. And yeah,
Yeah.
um, it's
Well,
nuts.
it's hard
That's
too,
it.
because it's like, yeah, I could hire somebody, but I'm also not making, we're not making enough to really
Mhm.
justify paying somebody to do something I can do myself, but also it's like, yeah, it's like a weird stage of like, I'm not, yeah, it's like hiring somebody could free up my time, but then that's maybe like an hour a week if I really broke it down. It's like, it just
Yeah.
feels, sometimes it feels like more time than it is because it's taking you away from the thing you want to do. So,
Right. Yeah. And sometimes I think like, what do I want?
mhm,
Do I want this to like blow up into some, and then have this awesome big team, or, get to a
yeah,
place where I could have that? I mean, yeah, having the option to have that's awesome. And then sometimes you just grow beyond what you're capable of managing. But
yeah,
I don't know. I think, well, I don't know. I hypothesize there's like this sweet spot where I'm like, can I make it just like, can I get to a place where it's me and like I have the option to have someone help me with the stuff that I don't love to do so that I
right.
can spend more of my time doing the things that I enjoy and feel like I bring value to,
Yeah.
but um I don't know. Hopefully we'll get there someday, but who knows? We never arrive. And so I've got to just enjoy it now.
Yeah, right. It's like whatever comes after this will be cool, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna enjoy the journey through this thing and see it
Yeah.
through and see what happens from it. And
Yeah.
I'm am enjoying myself right now. So I think until I start hating it, it's like I'm gonna just keep on this path and keep working because it's like we keep getting cool opportunities and we keep getting more orders and
That's
finding new
awesome.
ways to kind of boost our boost our clientele without like putting ourselves into such a scramble that we can't keep up kind of thing. But
Yeah.
still keeping our limits of like, okay, it's just two of us, like we have to figure out how to make it work with just two of us. And like, um so that's been interesting, but it's been great because it's like, okay, I think we found our flow pretty well. And it's like we can crank out a lot of quilts in a week if we're really
Mhm. Yeah.
really stay on top of it. But anyway, it's just interesting how it all shakes out. So
Yeah. Well, I so admire you long armors. There's just those machines seem so intimidating to me that I mean, they seem amazing. And of
yeah.
course I would like love to, if I were to ever have the opportunity to own one, that would be just incredible. But
Hmm.
in the meantime, I love sending them off to
Yeah.
long armors and like
Right.
don't have to think about all the work that they had to do to load it. And, like I don't even know all the steps,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It's a lot, but I mean, we just learned at our local quilt shop how to do like how to do it free motion, but then also how to like follow the paper pantographs, which are you're on the back side of
mhm,
the machine, you're following like a laser light. It's crazy. But
right. Yeah.
when we were buying our own, we were like, we definitely want the computer system because we want to be able to maximize our time as far as like not having to be standing over the machine the whole time. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that some people really love that and they enjoy that and that's how they do it. And there's, you know, beautiful work that comes from that. And so I think, you know, do what makes you happy. But for us, it was like, if we're going to do this as a business, like we need to be able to maximize it and make sure it's perfect every time because, when you're
Mhm.
doing it by hand, it's you're tracing a pattern, but also like it's going to have wobbles here and there and
Mhm.
intricacies of like following certain things that some people are so good at it and you can't tell. And I'm just like, good for you, but that is not my jam.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Some people I'm like, mine would have, be like
yeah,
it would like I would have be shaking the whole time.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
amazed.
it's crazy. And like, then I was, that was the quilt shop I was working at for a little bit. And I was teaching the long arming classes because I know how. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was just funny how scared people were of the machines. And it's like, I get it because it's like this giant machine, but I'm like, it doesn't have a mind of its own. Like, you are in control of it. And so I was just funny, like, how much of how I was talking to them is like how I would talk to my third graders and not like in a belittling way, but just like the
Right.
encouragement and the like talking them through like that fear of trying something new and just like hoping to share that joy of it with someone
Mm.
else. Like, it's so fun, you're gonna love it. And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, you will. And then to see them coming back after the class and be like, I'm here, I brought a quilt, and just being so excited. And like, that is so fun. That part is so fun.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and you're adding like completely new tools to their toolbox and
yeah,
helping them create art. That's awesome.
yeah. So I mean, even if you don't really use it, it would I think you would probably enjoy the heck out of a class, like just learning how to use one because they're a good
Yeah,
time.
I would.
If you think about like you're not moving the fabric, you're moving the machine and just kind of like that concept, it really helped me get less afraid of the machine because even though we had one, like I wasn't on it as much as my mom. And so I would get really stressed out around it
Mhm.
before because when I was teaching, I would only help like on my breaks and during the summer and stuff. But um now that I've been on it so much, I'm like, oh, okay. I have to like remember that, like teaching them, I'm like, right, I have to remember I used to be so scared too. And like, okay, what was the thing I was afraid of? And how can I like help them see that they've got control over that before they like, run off and like make a huge mistake that will stress them
Yeah.
out. And anyway, it's a fun process. And having that skill to finish your own quilts too is super fun. And but sending them
Yeah.
off, like I think too is kind of
It's magic.
satisfying because
It's
then you're like,
magic.
I've made this thing. Now you get to put your magic into it.
Do
And
your thing and
yeah,
send it back and, "Oh, wow, look at this."
yeah, like, wow, what a beautiful quilt. Who made it? Like,
I feel like long armors deserve I try to tag my long armor in all my stuff, but I just feel like they don't get enough credit, for the pieces that they have a part in, and even I'm not good about this either, and I do think about this, that I should be better, including, like, the designer of the pantograph.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes I don't know, like, it just requires a lot of work to figure out I wish that's like was more available maybe.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know,
Yeah.
because even that in itself is, and I think that's like such a part of quilting that I love is just all these different elements and people that had, it's like the person who designed the fabric and then the pattern design and then the quilter and the pantograph, and it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's crazy. There's so many hands that touch your quilt that don't even know they're touching your quilt, you know? And
yeah.
it's
I think that's true of like most things. It's like, well, who grew the cotton to the,
mhm,
like
right.
who manufactured it into the fabric and created the ink that like printed on
Yeah.
the, like who created the parts for the machine.
Yeah.
Um, but it is cool when you think it just like gives you a sense of gratitude. It's like, how
Hmm.
cool. We all came to like this all culminated in this piece of art.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like so fun to be able to just stand back and go, dang, like I made that, but also like there's so much more to it than just like, oh yeah, I sewed the fabric together, but that's not including, yeah, everything else. And so
Yeah. It's
I love,
humbling, at least.
hmm,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is. And like it's so funny because we have an Airbnb out of our part of our house. We rent out a room and
Hmm.
we've named it the Cozy Quilt House. And so of course
Oh,
there's quilts everywhere because why not? And so people ask like, oh, you make all these quilts? And I'm like, oh yeah. And it's like so funny to like my husband will take over the conversation, be like, aren't they beautiful? Like she makes them all. Her mom have this business. And like he just like gets like he's like my hype man. I'm like, what the heck? This is so funny. Like, and he has like an appreciation for it. I think before he was just like, okay, you're making quilts, whatever. But like having seen it, because he's the one who helped us like get the business started and come up with,
mhm.
he and my dad like helped us come up with the plan for it. And they've kind of, taken a step back to let my mom and I do our thing. Cause it's like, they're like, well, you're the experts. You guys are doing
You're
the
the
day to
quilters.
day. Like, you don't need our opinion. It's fine. Um,
Yeah.
but now that he's seen like all the steps and the pieces that go into it and the time that goes into it, he just has this appreciation that like he never would have had before. And it's just like so funny, like just hearing him talk about it because it feels like an out of body experience sometimes. Like, oh yeah, this is a really cool thing I do. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you sometimes have to stop and you're like, wow, look how far I've gone.
yeah,
That's pretty freaking cool.
yeah. It's it's a cool feeling of just like when you can step back and can let yourself be humbled by the whole process and
Yeah.
just the gratitude that comes from that, I think helps keep me in it more. Like, so
Yeah.
I think if I didn't have that, if I was like taking it for granted, I'd have a harder time showing up for people, and
Oh,
showing up
for
to make
sure.
to
Yeah.
make the
That
quilts
fills
that
your
need.
cup.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's fuel
yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure. Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Brooke. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and
Yeah,
it sounds
same.
like we have a lot of kind of philosophy ideas and thoughts in common. And
I think Boise or Salt Lake or somewhere in between get together is in order. So
yeah,
yeah, we'll
I
have
think
to
so.
have to get together sometime.
Yeah, I'm like meeting more and more people who are in Salt Lake. I'm like, what the heck? Like, you guys
I
can come to
know.
Boise, or I'll come to you, and we can all hang out.
Yeah, there's a lot here. And I admittedly, I guess I'm sort of a recluse. I'm now starting to tr take some initiative to get a little bit more in the loop of the local quilting scene here because there are a lot of even like modern I think quilting has a huge like history
Hmm.
here in Salt Lake or in Utah in
Yeah,
general. But even like modern quilters, there's a lot of folks that I think are kind of our era, if you will,
yeah.
or aesthetic. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, trying to make those in-person connections. It's always nice when you can like take things off of social media and actually
Yeah,
connect in person makes it much more meaningful, I think. So
yeah.
I'm doing that.
Yeah, it's like I love that I've made all these connections, but now I'm like, okay, I need to meet some of these people in person because it's like we
Yeah.
clearly had
Are you
a
going to
good
quilt
connection.
market?
No, we're gonna go to
Oh,
QuiltCon though.
okay.
So we're we're getting ready to like get everything purchased and squared away for that. But
Oh, that's exciting.
yeah, so I'm hoping to meet some people there. And yeah, we're not doing market this year, but we're like, I think we've been so focused. Like we kind of know these things exist, but it was never like in our minds that like we could go to that. Like we could
Hmm.
go do that. And now we're more thinking about it. So it's like I think once we get QuiltCon under our belts, it'll be easier for us to like want to travel
Yeah.
more. And it is a balance of like, okay, taking time off from the business and making sure
Hmm.
that we've got things organized and done around that time so that we're not like putting anybody's project on the back burner kind of thing. So I think logistically it feels kind of scary, but we really want to start getting out there more. So
Yeah. No,
I'm
this is my
excited.
first, I just registered for Quilt Market this
Ooh,
fall. And like, this is my first, I've never gone to anything really.
really?
Yeah. So I'm like,
Oh,
okay, this might be, I don't know if this is the right kind of first one to, I tend to just jump into the deep end all the time. That's just my style.
yeah.
So this
No,
jives, totally jives.
yeah. I've heard super good things about Quilt Market, so I'm sure it'll be a blast. Yeah, it just wasn't on our plans this year, but I'm excited to hear how it goes because I know like we have a client of ours that's going, like she's like,
Hmm.
I'm going, and we're like, okay, well, tell us how it is, because
Yeah. Well, I would
we'll be
also love to go to QuiltCon. And I've like never submitted a quilt. I think I've always been too, back to my confidence thing. I'm like,
yeah,
they won't like my quilts.
yeah, and it's crazy
Yeah,
because
it's
it's
on
like,
my list.
yeah, you should just throw one in there, see what they say,
Yeah.
because I mean, I'm saying that and I'm like, I would never, but I'm also not a pattern designer, and I think I don't know, I'm just not in that headspace right now, but it's crazy because it's like sometimes you see people's rejects and I'm like, what the heck? Like, why?
I know. I know. I think there's probably just too many great quilts. They just cannot,
Probably. And
they
they have
can't
to be
include them
so
all. But
nitpicky to like
yeah.
try to
And like, I
pull.
don't know if they have like themes that they're trying to align with too. It could be like,
Yeah.
oh, well, we've got too many, we're oversubscribed in the curves,
Yeah.
section.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
some of them are just absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah. I'm like really looking forward to seeing the quilts and taking some classes and just meeting people in person. I'm so excited because I know like there's at least a handful of people that I've interviewed that are like, yeah, I'm going. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I get to actually meet you in person. And
Yeah. Oh, that would be awesome.
yeah, so but it's like it's fun that I'm like finding more people in the Salt Lake area because it is such a quick jaunt, like I mean 5 hours, but it goes by fast and it's a good weekend kind of thing. So it's like I'm like, okay, if you're in Boise, tell me because I'll take you to all the local quilt shops and we can go have fun. And
I
so
definitely will. Yeah.
yeah,
I'll
I'm
let you
fun.
know.
Cool. Well, thanks
Well, thank you
again.
so
And
much. That was
yeah, and
awesome.
we'll talk again soon.
All right. Look forward to it.